I'll teach you what I know. Oh, sheesh. Oh, no, wait. Oh, wait, hang on. This is what we call a preemptive burnout. Okay. This actually is going not as well as I thought it was going to go. Oh, we're back on course. Here we go.
No.
This is actually a shortcut to get into the pits. Let's just go this way.
That's the right way.
Oh, I totally forgot about the back chicane.
Yeah, that's there. Is it officially blown up? Can you move?
I can't move.
Yeah, the car is done, totaled. Yeah. You're not driving my car anymore.
Hello everyone, I'm Jessie Punch and welcome to the Pace Lap. The playoffs continue this weekend as we get the best of both worlds. Is it a road course? Is it an oval? It's both. It's the Charlotte ROVAL. Joining me a little bit later on to talk about the weekend ahead is Xfinity Series driver Kaz Grala. But first, we've got to recap the action from this past weekend. Roll the highlights. In the modified race, Ron Silk led 56 laps, and he was in control on lap 223 when he made contact with Eric Goodell after splitting a lapped car. That one took both Silk and Goodell out for the remainder of the race. The final laps of the competition came down to a battle between Doug Coby, Bobby Santos III, and John McKennedy. Incredible defense from Santos to hold off Coby, Santos taking the win less than a second ahead of McKennedy. 6th win at New Hampshire for Bobby Santos, and first ever win for car owner Dave Sapienza. On Saturday at New Hampshire, a dominating win for the K&N Pro Series rookie Ty Gibbs. He led 112 of 125 laps, beating Tanner Gray to the line by almost 6 seconds. 4 second-place finishes this season in the K&N Pro Series East, and Ty Gibbs finally parks it in victory lane. Second to last race of the season for the NASCAR Pinty Series, Kevin Lacroix, the points leader, started on the pole, and he led the first 92 laps of the race. But with only 8 laps to go, Andrew Ranger stole the lead, controlling the final laps to earn the win. A huge win for Ranger as he takes over as the new points leader heading into the final race of the season. The NASCAR Xfinity Series kicked off round 1 of the playoffs Friday at Richmond. Austin Cindric started on the pole and led the first 6 laps, but the rest of the race was dominated by Christopher Bell. Bell led 238 of 250 laps, winning both stages and locking himself into round 2 of the Xfinity Series playoffs. More big news was announced this week regarding Christopher Bell. He will make the move to the NASCAR Cup Series next season, driving the 95 for Levine Family Racing. Welcome back to the Pace Lap. Joining me this week, a very familiar face here on the Pace Lap, driver of the number 21 Chevrolet for RCR, Kaz Grala. Kaz, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back for the millionth time. Always love coming out here.
Always good to have you. You give us really great insight, and since we're going to the ROVAL this weekend, I'm really excited to have you here because you're really going to help me break it down, get a better understanding of what we're looking at. But before we get to ROVAL talk, we need to talk about this past weekend in Richmond. We just saw that Xfinity highlight before we went to break. Christopher Bell absolutely dominated. What did you think about that race?
I thought it was a very exciting race. I mean, Richmond always puts on a good show. You can really race each other side by side. There's multiple grooves, tire fall off. It's got all the fun components of racing. But Christopher, really killed the competition. It's been quite a few times that he's done that. I feel like Gibbs has a couple tracks on the schedule that they have figured out and they dominate at, and Richmond's definitely proven to be one of them over the past couple years, not only in the Xfinity race but the Cup race too. They came to play this past weekend.
On the playoff side in the Xfinity Series, obviously Christopher Bell has kind of asserted himself there, but then we've seen a tremendous season from Tyler Reddick and from Cole Custer as well, pretty much pointing their way towards Homestead. You could predict, but who do you think is going to be that 4th guy competing with the big 3 at Homestead?
That's tough. I mean, there's been a few that have shown strength. I mean, obviously, Allgaier has. Chase Briscoe, I think, has looked really good all year. And Cindric definitely is a threat to possibly win the ROVAL this weekend, so he could get his way into the next round. But to me, when I look at Homestead, I don't know who the fourth guy is going to be, but I do know if it happens to be Chase Briscoe, in my opinion, he's the only one that could really upset and maybe take down the big three, just because he's only raced at Homestead once, and he won in the truck. He's a dirt guy. He loves to rip the fence. So he's one that I'd be worried about if I were one of the big three. I think they could probably take everybody else, but Briscoe's going to give them a run for their money.
You know, we had Larry Mack on the show last week, and he said right now, if he were to pick another driver, he would pick Chase Briscoe as that fourth guy to be competitive. So right on the same thought process there. And, you know, we saw Briscoe take the win at the ROVAL last season. So heading into this weekend, there's good stuff going on there for Briscoe. I don't know. It should be interesting, though, to see how these Xfinity playoffs shake out. Well, we did have some action on the Cup side as well in Richmond, playoff action. Let's check out the Cup highlight from this past weekend. Race number 2 of the Cup Series playoffs was a Joe Gibbs Racing showdown. Martin Truex Jr. earned the first stage win, and Kyle Busch took stage 2, leading a total of 202 laps. Martin Truex Jr. regained the lead in stage 3, passing Brad Keselowski on lap 282. But on lap 316, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. gets loose after exiting the pits, and he makes contact with the 19 of Truex, sending him spinning and handing over the lead to Kyle Busch. Restarting third, Truex chased down his teammate over the next 50 laps, finally edging him out for the lead with just 25 laps remaining. Martin Truex Jr. beats Kyle Busch to the line by almost 3 seconds. Back-to-back wins for the 19 team. From your perspective, looking at this playoff grid, looking at this weekend, who do you think has really got to pull some weight this weekend at Charlotte?
Well, to me, I'm looking at Ryan Newman. Right now, he is above the cut line, but he's kind of squeaked his way in a couple times, not just this year, but in past years in the playoffs. And he's not one that I typically think of as a road course ringer, but he is a sleeper. I feel like you can never count him out. Even if you're not expecting to see him do well, you just can't count him out. So I think he's about 10 or 12 points above the cut line now. He's going to have to hold on to that, I think, at the ROVAL, because there are a couple guys below the cut line that I think could have some really strong days at the ROVAL. And as you said, they've only raced there once before, so it's easy to say who we think might have a strong day there. We don't really know, so it's going to be exciting to watch and see who has a strong performance and who maybe has some trouble at the ROVAL, because I'm sure there's going to be some.
Oh, there's definitely going to be trouble at the ROVAL, which makes it great for us fans getting to watch the race. Not so great for the guys competing in the playoffs. And it's like you said, with Ryan Newman, he's been so consistent, and that's kind of been what's propelled him to this point in the playoffs. And I look at someone like Eric Jones, who after, the post-race disqualification, post-race failed inspection this past weekend at Richmond, he's sitting 40-plus points below the cut line. He's really struggling now. And it's just amazing that one thing, finishing in the top 4, but that post-race disqualification is really what's put him in trouble now heading into Charlotte. So going to be interesting. Like you said, ROVAL, it's always a gamble. Should be a great race. Let's take a quick break, though, because I have a lot more ROVAL questions for you. And when we come back, we're also going to learn a little bit more about safer barriers from our friend Bubba Wallace. Welcome back to the Pace Lap. Kaz and I were discussing this past weekend's Cup action at Richmond and Martin Truex Jr.'s big win, second week in a row. I want to take a closer look at that win, because that was actually the first time that Martin Truex Jr. has ever won 2 weeks in a row, him and Cole Pearn together. So kind of an exciting win for them, on top of it being the second race in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously makes that a big win for them. But we discussed a little bit earlier JGR's performance this past weekend at Richmond. They finished 1 through 4. All 4 of their drivers are in the playoffs. It's been a really great season for them so far. What do you think we're going to see that continue, or was this kind of just a really great showing at Richmond?
I think we'll see it continue throughout the playoffs. I mean, obviously, Gibbs has figured out this package that they've implemented in 2019, and I'm sure as seasons go on, if they were to keep the same rules package, other teams will catch up. That's just the nature of the sport. But with only, a handful of races remaining in this season, I'm not sure if anyone's going to have time to catch up and really dominate more than Gibbs already has. So I'd say that Gibbs has pretty much been the winner of this package so far this year. But of course, it all comes down to Homestead. That doesn't guarantee them a championship. They've got a good shot at it, but last year we saw Logano shake up the big three, and I don't think anyone expected him to walk away with the championship. So you can't count anybody out until we see the checkered flag at Homestead.
If we continue to see this steady success from the other three drivers, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin, do you think we'll see all three of those guys competing at Homestead?
That would be assuming that none of those three have any issues in this next round of the playoffs, which we can't say that at all. So they could be in the Final Four, but they very well could not be. You might not even see a Gibbs driver in the Final Four. That is this playoff format. It comes down to game time pressure. You just don't know what's going to happen in each round. You have to perform flawlessly, and sometimes you do, and sometimes things go wrong. It's a team sport, so any number of things could take them out of the playoffs. So we're going to have to tune in to see. But I'd put my money on at least a Gibbs driver running for the championship when it comes time for Homestead.
That is one of the most difficult things about our sport, and quite honestly, one of the hardest things about talking about our sport is that there is so much up in the air, and there's so much that could happen that's out of the driver's control that it really does make it hard to make predictions. But I would agree with you. I think that we will definitely see at least one Gibbs driver competing at Homestead, and as of right now, it's looking like it could be Martin Truex Jr. just because of the fact that he's won back-to-back races. And actually, fun fact here, he's only the fourth driver since the playoff format was implemented in 2004. He's only the fourth driver to have won the first two races. So that's a pretty big feat right there in itself. I'd have to think that momentum is going to continue to propel him forward this weekend at a track where he almost won last year. So everything's looking pretty good right now for Martin Truex Jr. and Cole Pearn. But again, so much up in the air this weekend at the ROVAL. We're just going to have to wait and see. Speaking of ROVAL, we saw a lot last year when it came to cautions and contact with barriers. So I figured, why not have a quick ABCs of NASCAR, learn a little bit more about safer barriers from our friend Bubba Wallace. Let's see what Bubba has to say.
Hey guys, it's Bubba Wallace, and today we're doing the ABCs of NASCAR. We're going to do B for barrier, specifically the safer barrier. The safer barrier is a steel and foam energy reduction barrier that makes it softer for when you actually do hit the wall. It doesn't hurt as bad. I've had an instance where I lost my brakes at Pocono and hit somewhat head on, and thankful for the safer barrier that it made it less of a hit. I was able to get out, walk away, and race the next weekend. The safer barrier has done so much for the sport over the last handful of years versus the concrete wall. Running into a concrete wall is never fun for anybody, especially us driving 200 miles per hour plus. So hitting a concrete wall versus a safer barrier is night and day difference. It absorbs the energy from the safer barrier instead of just full impact into a concrete wall.
Welcome back to the Pace Lab. Kaz, as we've been talking about, we are obviously, well, I was going to say going road course racing this weekend, but we're kind of getting the best of both worlds this weekend. We're getting half of an oval and half of a road course at the Charlotte ROVAL this weekend. And you were not racing, but you did race last year and had a great finish at that. You finished 8th last year on the ROVAL in the Xfinity Series. What can you tell me about this unique track? What did you learn about it last year?
I learned a lot. Well, first off, I started learning in practice when I backed the thing into the tire barrier just a little bit and had to fix a little rear damage. So it's a place that can bite you very quickly, much more so than you'd even expect. So you have to treat the track with respect. And I think this weekend for all the drivers out there, the biggest thing is going to be racing the track, not each other. Because at the end of the day, especially with it being a playoff race, but even just in general, it's really all about you beating the track and not beating yourself. So if you get too caught up in other competitors and trying to drive in deeper to pass them, we saw last year in both races that doesn't usually work out. So I think that one of the biggest things I learned was just patience and taking care of your equipment, and especially for the playoff guys are going to need to do that.
Well, you make a really interesting point, and you weren't alone in having those issues in practice. And that's why that's such an interesting point about racing the track, because we saw so many guys hurt themselves, not physically, but hurt damage to their car prior to the race even beginning. And it's solely because they didn't understand how to race at the track. And that's where, you know, some of these drivers that have been more consistent this year, maybe not with wins, but just with getting through the field and having consistent finishes, that's where we might see them perform pretty well this weekend on a track like the ROVAL. But so much up in the air. After watching last year, it's really anything goes. And it's even more interesting given the fact that last year it was new, and they've made even more changes heading into this year. There was one chicane last year. Now there are 2 chicanes, which I don't know. You had a very strict definition of the word chicane, so if I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But what do you think about these changes, though, in these chicanes?
You're absolutely right. They changed the backstretch bus stop, what we would have called a bus stop, to now what we call a chicane. So last year it was a much faster corner, symmetrical switchback, whereas now it's more similarly shaped to the front stretch chicane, kind of a bit of a V. And the idea is it's going to slow cars down a little bit more, and they were able to structure it in a safer way. Last year's bus stop, it was a blast, but I think I'm with every other driver when I say it was the most terrifying corner I've ever gone through in a race car. So I agree with NASCAR on this decision. I think that this will be a lot safer for everybody, and the best part is because you're slowing down more, it's created an extra passing zone because you're going to be braking harder for a longer period of time. But they have maintained the integrity of the corner as far as you can't go in there too wide. I've seen the layout of the corner. I've even tried it on NASCAR Heat 4. You're not going to want to go in there side by side. So it's going to make for some really interesting dicing, especially following restarts through that section.
You say you can't go in there too wide, but we know they're going to try.
They are.
We absolutely know that they're going to try, because it goes back to what you were saying earlier too. This racetrack is hard enough in itself, much less it's a playoff race. So there's so much on the line. Well, Kaz, you mentioned having tried a couple things in Heat 4, and you were actually able to teach me a lot more about the ROVAL through playing Heat 4. Let's take a look at what you were able to teach me, some of the technicalities of this unique track. All right, Kaz, so take me around the ROVAL.
Well, here we're exiting pit lane, and now we're diving down into turn 3, and this is the turn that bit me last year in practice. Something about the shape of it and the way the track is banked, or really not banked as much as you would think, can really bite people. But if you hit turn 3 perfectly, turn 4 can be a really satisfying and fun corner. Here we go turn 5 up to turn 6. This is a really important section because you crest this hill right here. It's really easy to spin your tires or make a mistake, and that's an excellent place to take advantage of guys in front of you who make a mistake. Now here, this corner here, turn 8, I would say is the most important corner on the track because it leads you onto this long straightaway, which ironically is actually the turn of the big track oval, but for us it's wide open with the ROVAL format, so it's important to get a great launch off turn 8. Now this is the new section of the track. This used to be a bus stop. Now it's a really tight little chicane here. Gonna slow everybody down, create a new passing zone, and it eliminates the fear of driving head-on into a tire barrier, which is what we had last year. So all around, I think it's a great change that NASCAR made there. And then of course the infamous front stretch chicane right here. Very difficult to get right. One of the hardest braking zones of any road course on the NASCAR schedule, and sets up for some great last lap excitement, just like we saw last year in the Cup race. Heading down here into Heartburn Turn, we saw a lot of craziness last year's Cup race here of guys heading straight into the wall on the restarts. It's a really hard turn to judge your braking point because there's not great reference points to the left of you. So turn 1 is one that you definitely have to be careful because it can come up on you very quickly.
So you mentioned the bus stop on the backstretch being kind of a new passing zone with that change this year. What are some other major passing zones that we can expect to see this weekend?
Well, turn 1 is the first passing zone you'll come to. It's a short braking zone, but one that you can definitely complete a pass in. Turn 3, if you're gutsy, you can maybe outdrive somebody into the corner and make it a passing zone. But for the most part, a lot of the infield section is just purely rhythm-based. So in that case, you wouldn't call them passing zones per se, but if the driver in front of you makes a mistake, which in a technical rhythm section does happen often, then usually you can pounce and capitalize on that mistake and grab the position. But other than that, I would say turn 1 and then the 2 chicanes on the track, one on the back, one on the front, those are really going to be your main passing zones. Those are the long, heavy braking zones, and that's where you're going to see most of your excitement.
All right, that's our run. Back her down.
Park it in the pits. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
We're definitely going to see some excitement this weekend at the ROVAL, and it's even better because it's right here in our own backyard. It's like a home race for NASCAR, which always makes it fun. Let's actually check out our weekend schedule because there's a lot of exciting races as the seasons are winding down. Let's take a look. On Saturday in Hamilton, Ontario, it's the final race of the season for the NASCAR Pinty Series. It all comes down to this. Andrew Ranger is currently the points leader, but Kevin Lacroix is second, only 11 points behind, and LP Dumoulin is third, just 38 points back. So this championship is still very much on the line. Also on Saturday, the K&N Pro Series West is back in action after almost a month off the track. They're taking on Meridian Speedway. And then in Charlotte, the NASCAR Xfinity Series is in action at the ROVAL, race number 2 of the Xfinity Series playoffs. On Sunday, just 2 races to go this season for the mods. Doug Coby is the current points leader heading into this weekend's race at Stafford Springs. Also on Sunday, some more ROVAL action. It's the final race of round 1 of the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. And finally, the Peak Mexico Series rounds out the weekend of racing in Guadalajara. Well, Kaz, you're not racing this weekend, but will you be attending the races in Charlotte?
I definitely will be. I would not miss the ROVAL race. And last year, since I was in it, I didn't get a chance to watch it as a fan. So that's one of the upsides of not being in the race this year.
It's a good time. I'll be there as well, so I'll see you there. Well, that's all for this week's episode of The Pace Lap. I'm Jessie Punch here with Kaz Grala. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you at the track.